afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Burmeister with Siebert Lutheran Foundation, and welcome to Making the Case for School Funding Workshop with Joan Feiereisen from Boundless Consulting, who I think many of you know. And we know that you and your teams have made extreme adjustments to your education model in the last few months, or last month mostly, and that you are continuously refining the way you educate students and support families. We've heard from many of you that making sure students and their families are fed and safe and have access to the internet and devices to participate in online learning are your main priorities as we settle into this new normal. But we also know that everyone on this call has a high quality education model, whether that was in person or now online. And that education model is possible because of the support of dollars above and beyond your choice voucher funding. That's why we're glad to have Joan here to share strategies for talking with your donors during this COVID-19 crisis and how to adjust and continue your development plans during this unusual social and economic climate. We ask that you keep yourself on mute during Joan's portion of the workshop and submit your questions via chat. We'll then circle back to them during questions and answers at the end. Also, we are recording the workshop, so that will be available on Siebert's website either later today or tomorrow. And I will send you an email with a link as well as a brief survey we'd appreciate you completing about the workshop. So thank you all for making the time to be with us today. We know that God is here also. He's guiding us and our teams and our community as we adjust and adapt to a drastically different way of living, working, and learning together. We give thanks to Jesus for delivering grace, redemptive love, and hope through the promise of eternal life in the midst of this unpredictable and kind of topsy-turvy time. So now I will turn it over to Joan, and thank you, Joan, for being with us and sharing your expertise today.
Well, thanks, Michelle. And I'm really happy to be here and see everybody. Going a little stir crazy. It's just me and my husband in the house. We've been sheltering in place since March 13th. So it's been a little crazy. I'm sure like all of you been doing this. So I've been interfacing with clients and with my teammates from Boundless, but it's not the same. I love seeing the variety of people and who are on the front lines doing things. I was really excited when Michelle and Siebert asked if I would do this because we have been really, researching and looking for different ideas and things that people have been doing during this really difficult time. Because as Michelle said, the first thing that you're concerned with is your delivery of education, but yet raising funds and money has got to also be a top of mind. So I did put together a presentation. I'm going to share screen and bring that up now. So I hope my technology works here. I'm gonna go over to my slideshow. I can get over there. Okay, can everybody still hear me, I hope? I'm just going to ask a question and somebody can answer. Was everybody still hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to go back. Just wanted to make sure. I'm not all the way sure of the technology yet, so I'm going to go back. Okay, so yeah, so here we are in our whole new world with school closed for the remainder of the year. And of course, all of your development efforts have been upended. I'm sure, the messaging of your appeals has changed. You might have been getting ready to send out or have sent out your second wave of your annual fund. I'm sure spring fundraising events were canceled. I've gotten many emails about galas and auctions in the spring that have been canceled or moved online, which is really sad. You can't do in-person visits. Another thing, a tool that's in the development director's toolbox that is now all of a sudden unavailable. You can't do tours of school, bringing people in to see your students, which is something that is always important to do. So it's a whole new world that you're dealing with when you're trying to raise funds. So we're just starting to look at what is that impact on giving. There was a good study that came out that Fidelity Charitable did, and they talked with several thousand donors who give regularly at the $1,000 or more level. And this study came out on the 8th of April, and it was really instructive because they asked those donors, how is COVID-19 going to impact your charitable giving? And 25% of donors actually said they plan to increase their giving, which was really good to hear because, as we all know, with the stock market plunging the way it has, with all of the uncertainty that's coming about, it's been a scary time to think, what are our donors going to do? But 25% said that they are going to increase their donations. Another 54% said that they're going to maintain their giving levels. So a good 3/4 plus of donors said, yes, we're going to still give at or greater than what the levels we're giving now. So it was a good representative sample of donors who regularly give at that $1,000 level who said they were going to be doing that. That was kind of heartening. And what was the age breakdown of that who said they were going to be increasing their donations? This was a little bit surprising, but it makes sense once you start to think about it. 46% of those were millennials. Those who are in their 30s and approaching 40 said that they were going to be increasing their giving. When you think about it, and again, these are not the small donors, these are those who give at the $1,000 or more level. Those late 20s to 30s, they aren't worrying about their retirement right now. So they aren't as worried about the money they might have had in the stock market or money that they are putting in for investing. They're just looking at the money that they're giving to charity. And the reputation of millennials is that they are very much worried about the social good. So 46% of millennials, and when you think about that, that does make sense. 25% of Gen X, the little bit older generation in their 50s, late 40s and early 50s. And then 14% of the baby boomers, those born between 46 and 64. A little more worried, actually quite a bit more worried, as they are approaching or in retirement already because of what is happening in the stock market. So they maybe aren't going to increase their donations, although many of them did say that they're going to keep them the same. So then the questions were asked, where are you going to be giving your money? 80% of those donors surveyed said they were most concerned about the impact on health and safety net organizations. So they were worried about people on the front lines, on hospitals, on safety net for people who are maybe going to lose their homes or lose their jobs. So social service organizations that were going to be taking care of those people. So that's where donors were most concerned and were going to first be giving their money. So how does that impact their giving? 43% of donors still said that they were going to continue to give to charities they always have. So if you're looking at your donors that you have now, they're still going to be giving to you. Good, close to half of them hopefully will still be giving to you. And if you've been doing a good job with keeping your donors close, you can probably expect to retain even more. The 25% of those donors said they were going to give to organizations that were most affected by the pandemic, and they may shift some of their dollars, and that's to be expected. Those donors who are going to increase their giving, maybe they're going to add dollars to what they ordinarily give, but some of them may shift their dollars to those safety net kinds of organizations, to healthcare, et cetera, because they see them as having more urgent needs at this time. The remainder were unsure, and that's a good third of donors. A good third of donors, they're not sure what they're going to do. And that kind of lines up with the uncertainty that we're seeing right now on a lot of different fronts. What's really going on? What's going to happen? How long is the shutdown going to happen? How long is the virus going to be around? How long will healthcare be impacted? How long will people be without jobs? So there's so much uncertainty, and it's going to be really hard for donors to say what they're going to be doing. So that's individuals, but what are foundations doing? Foundations are really stepping up, and if you've been reading a lot, you've been seeing that there's been a lot of efforts for foundations who have come together to do things like donating PPE for healthcare workers, for donating food to food pantries, for offering new rounds of grants, even in our city as well. The Council on Foundations, and if you're not familiar with them, they have a really great website. They've actually put out a pledge for foundations that belong to the Council on Foundations. And they are urging foundations that belong to the council to take this pledge, where they say they want to loosen or eliminate restrictions on current grants. So they say foundations should convert current grants that are out there that are project-based into unrestricted support, so that organizations can use them for what are most urgent needs, because they're realizing that it can't be business as usual. So if you got a grant for a project, for example, to implement some new kind of learning system, that you could use that for something now you need maybe to convert to mobile learning, which you might not have expected before. So they're encouraging their foundations to be nimble, to let their organizations be flexible, so to release their grantees from restrictions. They're also saying, make your new grants unrestricted as possible so that everybody has flexibility to react to the crisis. And they're also saying you should, to the foundations, that you should support organizations in communities that are most affected, that might not be funded currently. So there might be places now that are experiencing this virus much more severely than others, and that they might not have been supported by foundations before, but they deserve a second look because they are being impacted much more than some other areas. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, about how you might be able to take advantage of that. Then they're also saying, don't put a big burden on our partners. Postpone, really onerous reports and site visits and those kinds of things, because our partners need to do the work that they have to right now. And it is so extraordinary right now. These are such extraordinary times that we don't need to burden them with paperwork and with all kinds of things. We just need to let them do their jobs. So the Council on Foundations is realizing what you have to do, and what all of the organizations in these challenging times, what nonprofits have to do, that these are extraordinary times, and that extraordinary measures are needed to let nonprofits do their jobs. So that's kind of, the atmosphere and the environment we're in right now. So what should the response be from schools to this? We have donors who, many of whom are willing to increase their gifts or at least keep on giving. We have foundations who are stepping up and saying, we are going to act in an extraordinary manner. We're going to give more unrestricted grants. We're going to release you from restrictions. We aren't going to require a lot of paperwork, but we have to know what you need. So there's really three things. You have to really redefine your case, because it's totally different than what it was back when you launched your annual funding back at the beginning of the year. You're going to have to find new ways to ask, because many of the traditional ways are no longer, are things you can no longer do. And above all, you have to keep your donors informed, because things keep changing from day to day, if not minute to minute. So let's look at first the case, which is probably the most important thing, because you're going to have to redefine your case. And one of the first things may seem kind of counterintuitive, because I think one of the first things you have to do is to really see, where are you spending less, and let your donors know that. To ask only for what you really need. So they might look at you and say, well, you're closed. So, all the things you usually ask for, things like, transportation or things for your athletic program or to keep the heat going, you don't really need those things. You might have donors who are parents, and they might be saying, hey, I'm schooling my kid at home. So, what are you doing here with all these teachers? Some may say, you must have reduced expenses. So what is it that you really need? Transparency is the key. You might want to do a new pro forma that shows your budget because there's still expenses. Huge percentage of any school budget is salaries, benefits. You still are paying your teachers, you're still paying your health insurance, you're still paying your retirement. All those things are still being paid. You have new expenses too, so you have to fund the consequences of what's happening now. So you need to tell your story. Yes, be transparent. Tell them, yeah, our heating bill's down. We don't have to pay for our buses, but guess what? We have some huge new expenses that have come up. We've had to totally revamp our technology. We've had to add computers for our students. We now have meal delivery that we've had to do. We have to support our families in new ways because they don't have the kind of resources at home that they can support their students on a daily basis with homeschooling. We have to give our teachers support. They're actually doing teaching from home, and they don't all have the kinds of resources that they need. So you have to tell a new story to your donors, which you may already be doing. I may be telling you things you already know. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge to your donors, yes, we have some reduced expenses, but we also have some increased ones as well. So I'd really recommend, you might have, especially for your major donors, they might want to see the new reality of your spending. So it doesn't hurt to sketch out a new pro forma for them so that they can see exactly where your money is going. You also want to start sketching out your future case for support because we're already going to be into May next week. And you are preparing for next year already. And there's going to be future consequences. You are going to have students who are going to be behind with a spring and summer gap. Our schools have always dealt with a summer gap, and especially those of you who are urban schools, the summer gap is especially grievous because kids who don't have the kind of summer enrichment that they need are always behind when they come back. And if you usually would offer a summer program, you might not be able to do that this year. We have no idea yet if schools will be able to be open this summer for summer enrichment. So you're going to have students who are going to be suffering from spring and summer gaps, and you are really going to need to have accelerated programs in the fall to help students catch up. So you have to start to think about what are those going to look like when we get back in the fall? And what are we going to need to do that? The education case is going to be one of the most critical cases outside of healthcare and safety net for individuals that the country can have. Because our education system and our education for students cannot afford to lose this many months and be this much behind and just say, oh, we will make it up in the fall without exceptional preparation. So starting to identify what your needs are going to be for the fall is going to be a critical part of your case for support. If you know already what some of those are going to be, put it in your case now for donors. You also may need to prepare for student retention issues. If you are a tuition paying school, you may have families who your financial aid needs may be increasing because you may have families who aren't going to be able to afford tuition as they have in the past with all of the job losses. The numbers of people who have lost their jobs in the Milwaukee area is enormous. And the number of people who could pay tuition before or needed only a little help for financial aid is going to be rising exponentially. You also might have families who are not re-enrolling in the choice program because you don't have the personal one-on-one communication on a daily basis where you're reminding people to meet the deadlines for filling out their applications for choice. And you may have a drop-off in the number of families that you re-enroll. You also might have attrition if there's deaths in families and people are moving to different locations. So you may have attrition that way as well. So you may have a lower census, which means you will have less earned revenue. So preparing for those kinds of things may also be something in the future that you will have to prepare for. So redefining your case in those terms, looking for more financial aid for students, looking for ways to increase your census for next year. Those are also things that you'll be having to look for in defining your case. Okay, so as you're preparing your case and making it solid, that'll be a really important thing to do, but you also have to get that case out to your donors. So finding new ways to ask. Of course, as we're sitting here, we all know it's now an online world more than ever. Moving your asks online as much as you can is a really critical thing. So I'm sure you've already done a lot of this already. One thing, I hope everybody's planning on participating in Giving Tuesday Now on May 5th, 2020. I have the website there, which has tons of ideas and resources. The now.givingtuesday.org/ideas. They have logos and templates and all kinds of resources for you. It's a special focused opportunity where you can share the needs that arose from the pandemic. So a lot of attention is going to be focused on that day, just like regular Giving Tuesday in December. But it's really going to be an opportunity for people to stop and think and give and share. There's a lot of opportunities on that day too for virtual volunteering as well as giving dollars. And for you to be a part of it, I think will be very important. There's going to be a lot of things on Facebook that day. So if you have a presence on Facebook and on Instagram, there's also different places and things for you to do on that day too. But I encourage you to go to the website and to explore it and to find out ways that you can participate on that day. Can always start a GoFundMe campaign as well. And to run the campaign for a specific project related to a need that you have arising from this pandemic. To do it for, if you need some more Chromebooks, that's a perfect one. To, have people donate $250 to get a Chromebook for students or a teacher is a perfect one. But I'm sure there's lots of other things. So much for a meal, $10 for a meal. So there can be all different levels that you can get people to donate. GoFundMe no longer has any other fees other than the credit card processing. They bought several of their competitors, so they eliminated their fees, which is good. They're currently matching $500 of the proceeds. So once you hit $500 in your campaign, they'll match it. And you can advertise that campaign through all of your social media platforms. So if you haven't done one yet, it's just a good way to get some money out in for a project. And then utilizing some networking tools with individual donors too. We've been working with our clients on a couple of these different ideas and things. So Skype, FaceTime, or Zoom a cultivation or solicitation call. Going one-on-one with the donor this way is not a bad thing to do. They might welcome the interaction, and you can really have a more personal conversation, even more than just a voice phone call. You can gather a group of donors into a Zoom meeting, just like we're having right now, for a state of the school and needs update. So just gathering people early evening, perhaps, tell them to grab a glass of wine and join you, and have your head of school give them an update on what's going on and what you really need. You can do an explicit ask or just kind of leave it out there and follow up with an email with a link where they can donate. But you can do that really easily now with a Zoom meeting. If it's not comfortable for your head of school or you don't think it's appropriate, you can also ask a donor to host that kind of small group gathering as well. And then have the head of school come in to speak, have your principal speak at the small group gathering, or have the donor themselves give a pitch for the school. You can also, this is one thing that we're just kind of looking into, that we've been kind of exploring, staging an online event. I mean, a lot of you probably moved your auctions online, but having an esports tournament, you know, I know a lot of golf outings were canceled, but there's esports have just taken off incredibly, but moving some of your sporting events to esports tournaments is an opportunity. So that could be kind of fun. And then also engaging donors as virtual volunteers. We were just talking with Kevin Festerling as we were waiting. He's already doing that. They have volunteers who are doing Zoom study halls with some of their students, but that is an excellent way to keep donors engaged and to do cultivation with them. So having donors doing those kind of virtual volunteers, it also really helps your teachers out, because I'm sure they are spread extremely thin right now. But using those kind of networking tools as a way to either raise funds, do cultivation, keep people engaged is really a great thing to do. So keeping your donors informed, keeping those cultivations, some other ideas, sending email blasts with updates. I'm sure you've been doing that. I've gotten several from schools that have been great. I think spiritually, it's important to keep engaged with donors, sharing daily prayer on social media somehow. One of the schools I'm linked with does that. They have one of the students doing daily prayer every day, and that is just such a big pick-me-up, which is great. Holding Facebook Live sessions with teachers is also another way to really stay connected. But I think any way you can keep donors informed, they have a lot of time on their hands right now. And any of those kind of sessions, I think, can be great. Foundation communication is just as important. I'm sure when we're done here, Michelle can chime in with this as well, but you can be in touch with your program officers. I'm sure they're willing to speak with you about any opportunities or new opportunities that are coming through. You can provide your foundations with interim reports that are needed. I would say all of you as schools, if I'm sure you have a lot on your plate right now, but to consider producing a joint white paper on the projected impact of the school closings on students. And it's probably too premature right now, but I think in the coming months, this would be a really helpful thing to help provide for foundations. And Michelle, again, might be able to speak to this later, but what will that projected impact of this gap be on students, and how well you've been able to keep up with them with the homeschooling? And it might be different for different kinds of schools and different levels, grade school versus high school. But I think you all as Lutheran schools to talk with each other and to say what the impact actually was, you know, this little slice of Milwaukee, and to share this with the community and with the state and with the country would be really an interesting thing to do. And maybe could be something that foundations would support. But you can also show your support for your donors, making phone calls to older donors. Many of them are probably feeling pretty isolated right now, would welcome calls from you. Show your support for them and see how they're doing during all of this. You can offer tips for coping within your updates as well, even as you're showing them how you're coping. You can talk to them about how they can cope as well. And of course, always pray for them. Having them know that you are praying for them, I know will be a big pick-me-up during these really difficult times. And then finally, looking for new opportunities, because there are new opportunities that are coming through. There's been new opportunities for grants that are related to the pandemic that have been announced. There's services like grantwatch.com. They offer these compilations for a fee. It might be worth the $15 to get those compilations now for a couple of months, because there's been a huge amount that have been announced, and it's hard to keep up otherwise. So those might be worth it. Grants.gov has all of the government ones that have come through, so keeping on those is a good thing to do as well. Consider looking at foundations that might not have funded your area before. As I mentioned with the Council on Foundations pledge, that might be a good thing to do as they're looking at new places. If you serve a lot of African American children, for example, Milwaukee has been so hard hit in the African American community. There might be more foundations looking to serve that community that haven't before. So that might be a place that you want to look at. And of course, monitor social media regularly. You know, Facebook gave out a whole bunch of grants, for example. And there's lots of them that are being announced regularly that are just popping up constantly. There are new opportunities. And I think you're going to be seeing more geared toward education, especially as the school year ends and as we get into the new school year. Now, I'll open it up to questions. I hope that there were some few helpful hints in there, and please be sure to share suggestions as well as questions. Let me get out of this sharing here.
This is Michelle. One thing I wanted to mention is you kind of referenced foundations a little bit. So most of you are previous or current CBERT grantees. So hopefully you got our communication about flexibility with outcome reports and the timing of them and the results in them. We understand that your outcomes are going to look drastically different this year than you anticipated they would look whenever you last had applied for a grant. So as Joan mentioned, please feel free to reach out to me as things are evolving, as timing changes with things, as programs change, as needs shift. So I'm always here to connect with you. So call or email anytime. And one question I saw Matt had asked about employment numbers on job loss or unemployment in Milwaukee. I can't find anything specific to Milwaukee yet. Just the over 47,000 number for Wisconsin. But I'll try to keep an eye on that. And if I can come up with anything, I will share it with you.
There's actually, it's 390,000 in Wisconsin.
Oh, is it 390?
390,000 in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I just didn't know if we had numbers yet because I couldn't find any, but we're working on our next appeal actually. I would like to know some of the numbers on our.
I thought it was approaching 50,000 in Milwaukee, and it's 390,000 in Wisconsin, but it's really high. I know it's really high.
Thank you.
So as we chat, if no one has an immediate question right now, perhaps we could ask the group to maybe share something that you've done in the last month from a development perspective that has worked or is working, or something that you've initiated that you think might be helpful for others to emulate.
This is Kevin with Kingdom Prep. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I just found it. So when we were shifting to online, a new donor prospect that we hadn't done work with in the past had approached one of their friends had approached us and said, hey, would you get involved in this, a new service to your families in preparing high quality dinners for families in need? And we were a little leery because we already felt like we were working overtime trying to do that online. So I would just share that went really well. We said yes when it would have been really easy to say no, not right now. We're not in the food distribution business. But since then, a couple of donors who jumped on with that different organization has since come through and just blessed our faculty with some significant gifts after they watched what they were doing on a daily basis. And so it just felt nice to watch saying yes to a small service to families, fulfilling an authentic need that asked us to pivot our normal function, brought a couple new donors into our lives. It does take a little bit more work, but some of the individuals who are doing some of the other functions in our school got to shift and seek out families who were in need. So that's just fun to share, and didn't want to say yes to a new function, but it's brought fruit in a couple of ways.
That's awesome, Kevin.
That is.
Well done. I guess I can share one or two quick things, what WISCO has done. We had a 2-week period to kind of reimagine and reinvent our auction. We decided to keep it on the same date. I was kind of getting sick of uncertainty. So I said, we're going to certainly do our auction on this date and continue to do it. And for the first time, really, we were able to contact people using social media. We just weren't good at doing it before. You know, we sent out email invites. So we had a really big social media presence. And I think we over doubled, if not tripled, our attendance in people who watched the auction. I guess our giving was down, but it still was the second highest auction that we had in terms of giving totals. And maybe, God just blessed things. There's no doubt in my mind that we didn't expect it to probably go as well as it did. But the team was excited to try something new. And I was encouraged by them and all the people that wanted to support, or just other organizations that said, well, what is this going to look like if we have to do this? You know, whether, Sarah, you guys, even in fall, God willing, by that time, we're attending the St. Marcus Gala and we don't have to worry about social distancing. But we wanted to, and we didn't really have a great idea. We wanted to try it. We did a Zoom recording like this. And I thought, minus some technical glitches, that it was a blessing. And we just weren't afraid to ask because people want to support you. Like religious institutions, I've heard, go down in drastic events that happen like this in the world, less than 1% in terms of people that support. And I've talked to friends that stopped asking people at this time. And I said, I think we still have to do it. Just be genuinely concerned and, with people and what they're going through. And you're not going to offend people. If you're hearing from them that they can't give and they lost a job, well, you're probably not going to make that one-on-one Zoom ask. But I think there's a way to do it. We're going to do an appeal next. I think that we're going to do a Zoom interview with our recruitment team, like what they're hearing from families who are incoming. So we're going to, because we know families are going to be impacted, tuition paying families, and that's where our biggest need is. So we're going to do a Zoom interview and try to get especially that Gen X and younger watching an appeal that's going to be a Zoom video. We haven't figured it out yet, but that's kind of our next play. So I'm interested. Joan, you had some great stats that are going to help with that. We're going to put that together hopefully by the Giving Tuesday on May 5th.
Good.
Matt, thank you so much for sharing that. We did a stewardship in uncertain times workshop, which was more geared towards churches. I think some of you might have participated, but that was one of the big takeaways from Mike, the presenter, was don't stop asking, which is exactly what Joan's echoing here. You need to do it carefully in case people's circumstances have changed. But I think some people are like, whoa, we shouldn't ask for money right now. But there are really, people want to help and they want to give. And that's a huge takeaway. And I want to share a little personal experience that might be valuable for you. Many of you produce like these really meaningful videos that tell stories of your school culture and environment. And you use these in fundraising events and situations. Obviously, you'd have to get permission like you always do to do this, but are there ways to capture some of the Zoom classes you're having with your students. My kids are doing some of the cutest, funniest things with their classes. We had one teacher, a first grade teacher, who had beach day for the morning read aloud, and she put a backdrop up and put sunscreen on her nose and put a tank top on and sat in her beach chair, and then had the kids come to the Zoom meeting in their swimsuits or summer clothes. So I think that, with parent engagement and permission, there are ways to touch donors' hearts with the stories of how your students are learning. And I even think if you have some families you're close to and you can capture some video clips and photos that they're taking of where their students are doing work. I've seen many of you already be posting those in little snippets on social media, but a way to compile those into one compelling video story that can really share the wonderful things that are happening during this time, just like you would in a normal spring school video.
Yeah, I just saw something from the UCC. They put out a video like very similar to what you're talking about. It was like a montage of photos of kids from home, little videos that parents had provided, like Zoom classes, and it turned out really cute. I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
We just recently shifted from an appeal standpoint. Around this time, our middle schoolers go on and discover America at the end of May, and they travel around the country. And obviously those trips were canceled. And for us, we do student written letters that go to donors asking for support of them to go on those travel experiences. And so we had to pivot, and it's one of our largest appeals that we do throughout the year. So about half of the letters were already written. So we put together an appeal letter from our superintendent and it would go along with the letters that were already finished, because the donors that give to that are very supportive and close to that program. So they're going to receive the letter from the student still, but we had to adjust the ask essentially, letting them know the trips are canceled, but how is their support going to continue to help us? And then to those donors that are not receiving a student written letter, we really painted the picture in that appeal of what it looks like for our families. And then the impact that their support will have from an emergency needs standpoint, continuing to support teachers and staff that are teaching virtually to try to minimize that achievement gap that we are going to see only widen in our city. So, and that their support will just continue to sustain our organization into the future. So we pivoted pretty quickly on that appeal, and that's going out in the next week. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting what the response is going to be to that compared to like in years past.
I thought I would just piggyback on what Sarah said. Something that our team, I think, has been realizing over the last couple weeks as we've strategized these new approaches is how to strike that balance between, of course, the heartwarming footage of kids in this new era of learning and what's happening, how to balance that with the reality of what our families' real needs are. So we've had to, and I think we're still kind of finding our way around this, but in that interest of transparency and truly asking for what we need, we want to deliver that message while at the same time not necessarily delivering a message of doom and gloom to our supporters. So we're trying to find that balance. I think we're getting a little bit closer every time we create something else for our donors. The other thing I'll mention too, and I don't know everyone here, but I'm with Sarah and Maria at St. Marcus. Hi. I have spent a lot of time just calling individual donors. obviously we all do that, but to be honest, with how heavy our plates are, taking time every day just to call donors is frankly something that falls off my plate all the time. So I've taken this opportunity to really just try and do that. And I don't know that it has necessarily directly translated to some gifts right now, but I do know that just from a cultivation standpoint, relationship building standpoint, it's just given me an opportunity to connect and reconnect with some of those donors that aren't necessarily at the top of the list. I hate to put it that way, but you kind of prioritize that personal contact because of the way you structure your day. And I've had several experiences of donors hearing from me who were just floored that St. Marcus would even call them because they considered themselves a minor supporter. They sort of assumed that it's really that major giving category where you get this sort of attention. And so it was wonderful just to get to know. And I've never really slid an overt ask into any of these calls. Our strategy here is simply to let our supporters know that we love them, we're praying for them, and basically asking, what can we do for you? Is there something we can do to support you? So it's been good. They've turned into very long conversations. So I only have like 2, maybe a day. But I feel like it's great spade work. When we get back to some normalcy, reaching back out to these folks for me just will feel easier because I would have had that contact with them during this time. So it's easy to, look back on that. So that it's a simple thing. We all call our donors, but I feel like right now is a great time to just make those reach outs that normally fall off our plate.
So true.
Hi, John from Shining Star. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I like what everyone's saying about pivoting, being ready to pivot to new approaches and new services during this time. Just in general, I think my 2 cents worth, I think it's wise to consider additional revenue streams in the future and what that might look like. At Shining Star, we're looking at different ways to focus more on virtual learning time and adding a more developed approach specific to VLP and virtual learning into what we offer moving forward. And that's generated some excitement among our supporters and is giving us some ideas about potential ways of, getting through this and getting to the future of Christian education.
Another positive for St. Marcus was really, so we have like a monthly donor email that we send out, but we've ramped that up to 2 emails a month. And we've kind of implemented this, like we've talked about this kind of state of the school and where things are at, because things are constantly changing. And we've done a video of our superintendent for each of those emails. And for us, it's just been really effective to get Henry back out in front of our donors, like in that way, because they love to hear from him. And it again is just another way, I think, to deepen those relationships, to stay in touch. I'm sure all of us are doing this, but that frequent communication, we've seen the open rates and click-through rates really increase because of that. So it's just from a communication standpoint that has been effective for us.
People have more time for your communication right now, so it's really a time to get in front of people.
Yeah.
So we have about 8 minutes left. Are there any questions, either for anyone in the group based on what they've shared, or for Joan specifically, that anyone would like to ask or put out there, or any other comments you'd like to make?
Has anyone done like a Zoom state of the school happy hour kind of thing yet?
No, we just talked about that with some of our top donors. We just have we call them a visionary circle. And typically we do 2 events a year. And I just got off the phone yesterday with Dr. Fisher and said, we need to do a Zoom happy hour with that group. So we haven't planned it yet, but we're thinking about doing it now. I just think, man, to do a state and just let people ask questions. So we don't need an agenda for this. This is just a Q&A, and how are you doing, and what questions you have, what's happening at the school, what would you like to know, and then answer as many questions as we can.
Yeah.
The other question I had, Sarah, I don't want to cut you off though. Does anyone else have any response to that? Joan, my question for you, I think most of us, I don't know everyone here applied for the PPP loan.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the last Siebert thing as well. So getting one of those grants, I think everyone here, at least I'm a little concerned about how do you communicate to donors? Because donors do ask, like,
Right.
Did you guys take advantage of the PPP loan? And then do you really need support at this point if you got the PPP loan? And of course we all do.
Right.
But yet it will be a big help for institutions. So what is the best way to communicate that? We want to be transparent and open and honest. So when people ask, we tell them. But how are you guys doing it? Just curious.
Well, that's why, when I first said about what you really need and doing a new pro forma, doing a new financial, and talking about the new challenges that you're going to have, because you're going to need more resources, because you're going to have more gaps, you're going to need more financial aid. That's why I would just do new financials, because donors are going to want to see them. And you can include the PPP as new revenues, but you're going to be losing other revenues. You're going to be, you're going to be getting less tuition. You might have less kids through choice. There's all kinds of things you're going to be losing, and you're going to have a lot of new expenses. So that's why I think doing new financials and new financial projections, putting out hard numbers is going to be so important to show donors what you really need. That transparency is going to be more important than ever. And I think even, people who run small businesses, we all know, even when you get the PPP, it's never enough, and it only takes you so far.
Yeah.
It doesn't last forever. And, you're going to be educating these kids for a lot of years and through a lot of things. So.
Exactly. True. That's only 10-week period or 8 to 10 weeks or whatever it helps with. It was just one of the thoughts that I had, because I know, Michelle, wasn't it, I think Pastor Fisher attended the last meeting you had where it was, we're not going to announce this publicly because we don't want to offend small businesses that didn't get it either. Or some of, that was part of the issue too, is there's people that need help and want help, and they're like, why are you getting this? You have, donors that you can rely on, and that's not necessarily true. But so I just didn't know if there's we're kind of trying to figure that part out.
You're also not Shake Shack, you're not. So people understand that, you need it too. So, but if you show them, I think if you show them the numbers, they get it. They get it's not cheap to educate kids.
In a good way, in a high quality, good way. I think that's the other thing, is just really emphasizing how so many of you have shared with me how you are going above and beyond for students and families. And you're all very humble Lutherans, which is great. But I also think, this is the time to, as you all do well, really showcase the things you're doing that are above and beyond, and that are special, and that are things that other schools maybe aren't doing or can't do because they don't have the additional support that you have.
Yeah, you're high quality.
As we look to wrap up, Joan, did you have any closing comments, or was anyone else going to say anything?
I think showing how you are, even though you can't remain open now, how you are an essential business is so important, you know, and how you are so essential. And as Michelle says, the quality that you provide for the whole child, physical, academic, spiritual, you know, maintaining that is going to be just so important. So you have a lot to share with your donors and with your prospects. So absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you, Joan, for sharing your expertise and your information. We'll put the recording online if you want to share it with anybody else, or rewatch or re-listen. And I'm sure we'll all be in touch again soon. And the Siebert team is praying for all of you, for all of our schools, for your families, for your students, your whole communities. We know this is not easy, and it is amazing what each and every one of you have done in order to pull off a positive learning environment for your students in basically zero amount of time. So kudos to you. Keep doing the amazing work. And I know that God will be there with us every step of the way. So thanks.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Back
Thank
at
you,
you, Joan and Michelle.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks again, you guys. Appreciate it.